1, 2, 3, 4! From the Riffs!
Hey, how's it going? I'm Big Will Johnson. This is Carmen Belair. And today we're going to be discussing some of the terminologies that are used. I think the most important one to use is what is tabletop RPG? Specifically the term RPG. That's short form for role-playing. I know it doesn't quite break down as an acronym, but it's role-playing RPG. And tabletop is simply that. It implies that you play on a tabletop. It's more important that we distinguish now. You used to be able to just say role-playing, but with the advent of video gaming, now RPG is generally used to describe games such as Final Fantasy or Lufia or wow, I'm getting old school on them, but
yeah,
games of that nature, which are video games. Tabletop RPG involves using dice and books,
sometimes
miniatures, but most importantly, your imagination and social skills. Essentially, you get together with a group of friends, and a scenario is presented, and you role play that scenario.
Yeah, my favorite way of describing role-playing is a role-playing game is like a novel, and all the players are the various characters of the novel. The GM is basically the rest of the world that novel is set in. And so as your adventure, your characters are moving through the novel, the GM describes that novel to you, and your characters act however you wish that you want them to.
What's that? What the hell is a GM? Well, if you go back to the old Dungeons and Dragons stuff, the GM was the DM was the dungeon master. GM, most people nowadays just say game master, or in our particular game group, because we think it sounds less lame, we use the term game manager. Essentially, in a game scenario, the GM is the one who sets up the role-play world in general. He's the one who sets up the stage. The players are the players, and the GM is the director, the producer, the lighting guy, everything else. Essentially, the GM is God. He uses the mechanics of the game in order to make sure the scenario plays from one point to another. That's what the GM is.
Yeah, he's the one going to provide all the villains, all the challenges, all the things your character has to overcome in order for you to enjoy the game.
Yeah. Now that brings us to our next point. NPCs. What is an NPC? Well, I guess I should explain what a PC is first.
Yeah.
A PC is a player character. That means a character that the player plays. An actor in the show. You're the star. You're the Bruce Willis. You're the Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're the main component. But then you're nothing without your backdrop. These are NPCs. NPCs can be the extras, such as the cannon fodder that gets blown up or stepped on when the dragon comes to town, or they can also be that sleazy tavern master, or the guy on the corner who gives you the intel on how to break into that government building, or something of that nature. They're non-player characters. That's what NPC stands for.
Yeah, they're the people in the game that you're going to interact with in order for the game to evolve. I mean, that's how you role play. You have to interact with these non-player characters, and then the GM will describe how they react, what they say, how they respond to you.
Now, the next thing I'd like to bring up is dice. Some people look at the dice and they go, why are there so many dice, and why do they look so funny? Well, that's because you have various dice for various game mechanics. Dice act as almost like a ranking system for actions most of the time. You have your 20-sided die, which we'll insert a picture for that. And that's what most game systems use. There are some that don't use the 20-sided die, but in the case of Palladium, 20-sided die determines most things. You also have what are called percentile dice, and That's
Or
these,
10-sided dice.
or 10-sided die. That's these lovely little babies here. You have the common 6-sided die. You have the Geek Caltrop or the 4-sided die, the D4. I left out the 8-sided die. There's also the 12-sided die, which I don't even know what it's used for most of the time.
Yeah, there's one.
I think in a lot of other D20 systems,
You
the
might use it.
D12 is relevant, but for the case of most Palladium games, I don't think it's relevant. So-
No, I usually use 2d6s. Although Splicers uses it a lot.
Oh, well, there you go. But he wrote it, so. So that's an explanation of the dice in general. You can go anywhere on the net and pretty much find out more if you really don't understand the concept of multi-sided dice. If that's the case, you know what? Gaming is going to be very difficult for you. I'm just going to say
Right.
it now.
The next thing you should know is basically for every game, regardless of what it is, the character you're playing, you're going to have a set of attributes for. A set of stats, statistics, whatever the game calls it. In Palladium, it's just attributes. You'll have 8 of them. They represent how good your character is.
Yes.
So if you're trying to rank yourself against other characters or you're trying to do something, your attributes are going to help determine that. Just about every game uses that mechanic. Then there's
Usually involving strength,
your physical.
dexterity, wisdom, constitution, and I guess in the D20.
Yeah, it'll be your physical and mental attributes that are written down for your character. Because just because you're an intelligent person, say you as the player, you went to university and you got your PhD in psychology. Well, you might be playing a character who's a goblin who's hit his head one too many times
And is now dumb as a box of rocks.
Yeah, and to reflect that, he'll have an intelligence of, like 1 or 2. It represents what that character is, and so you role play to those attributes. In real life, you might be stuck in a wheelchair, but you have a character who can sprint, the 20-yard dash with no problem. It doesn't matter in the game what you're like, it's what the attributes of that character are like.
Now, I think something else we should probably highlight is that though RPG stands for role-playing or role-playing game, I guess I should have said, a role-playing game, although it's described as a game, it is a game, but it's not a game of winners and
Or
losers.
losers.
It is a game of experience. You are playing this game to have an experience. The same reason you play most video games. Most video games, way back in the day, it was all about getting points so that you could, quote unquote, beat the game. Now we've finished the game. We've had the experience. We now know what happened to the main character on that quest, whatever it may be. Role-playing games are very much the same thing. So I think it's important to highlight that, especially for new players, because there's a tendency for new players to feel that they must make the most powerful mage in the universe, and he must strike down every enemy with one flick of his hand, and the ladies all love him, and he's the most important thing, and that's really irrelevant, because really, you can just say that, and it's as relevant as anything else in the game, because it's not real.
Yeah.
The loot in a game is not real. It sounds funny that I'm putting it this way and then I'm dumbing it down for some of you out there, but you'd be surprised. I've seen fist fights over in-game items because, you know what, anytime you have a social dynamic, you end up with people who become emotionally attached to the activity at hand. So keep in mind, it's a game, it's supposed to be fun, and it's about the experience.
Yeah. It's often about how much your character grows, not what he acquires. But that gives you a good overview of the basics of a role-playing game.
So, till next time, I'm Big Will Johnson,
And Carmen Blair,
and this is Fun to Riffs, Tips and Tricks.
see you.